They claimed to defend freedom. In reality, they made secret deals with the most dangerous forces of the 20th century. Officially, it was all about stability. In practice, a different game was being played under the mask of democracy. With armies that didn't exist. With operations no one was supposed to know about. Heard about the Vatican? It was involved. Intelligence services? They managed the logistics. Nazis? They were entrusted with Europe's future. Street incidents, provocations, altered facts, all for one goal: to maintain control at any cost. This story isn't fiction. It's confirmed by documents, acknowledged at the state level, and only partially declassified. And if you stay until the end, you'll learn what Operation Gladio really was, and why its official closure was just a convenient formality. Europe, 1945. The continent lies in ruins, but something stirs in the rubble. Not reconstruction, but something far more sinister. General Reinhard Gehlen sits in an American interrogation room, his future hanging by a thread. He should be facing trial for his role in the regime's atrocities. Instead, he's making a deal that will reshape the next 50 years of global politics. Gehlen offers the Americans everything: his entire network of Soviet intelligence, built through years of brutal interrogation and systematic abuse. The price? Complete immunity and a new purpose. The Americans accept without hesitation. Within months, Gehlen is building something unprecedented. He calls them werewolves, former Hitler youth, discharged soldiers, men who learn to kill without question. By day, they appear as ordinary citizens. By night, they train in abandoned warehouses, learning the art of sabotage, psychological warfare, and silent elimination. Alan Dulles watches from the shadows with satisfaction. The Central Intelligence Agency needs soldiers who can operate beyond the law, beyond morality. Men who understand that in the New World Order, victory justifies any method. But the werewolves are just the beginning. Gehlen's vision extends far beyond Germany's borders. He sees a network spanning continents, a shadow army that answers to no government, bound only by their shared hatred of communism. The question isn't whether they'll use these weapons. The question is when. Rome, 1947. Communist candidates are winning local elections across Italy. American strategists watch with growing alarm as the nation that gave birth to fascism now flirts with its ideological opposite. The upcoming national elections could change everything. If Italy falls to communism, the entire European balance crumbles. The Soviet sphere of influence would extend into the Mediterranean, creating a foothold that could prove impossible to dislodge. Traditional diplomacy won't work. The Italian people are making their choice democratically, and they're choosing the wrong side. Enter Operation Gladio. Named after the Roman short sword, it promises to cut through political obstacles with surgical precision. The plan is elegant in its simplicity. Recruit hundreds of Italian citizens, train them in guerrilla warfare, and prepare them to resist communist rule through any means necessary. But resistance requires funding, massive funding. And Congress, with its inconvenient questions and budget oversight, cannot know this operation exists. The solution comes from an unexpected source. If official channels won't provide the money, unofficial ones will. The agency already has connections to Air America, the airline that isn't quite what it seems. Planes that carry more than passengers. Cargo that generates enormous profits in America's cities. The product moves through Sicily first, hidden in wheels of Parmesan cheese and barrels of olive oil, then across the Atlantic, where it finds eager customers in every major American city, The profits flow back through channels so complex that even experienced investigators lose the trail. But someone has to manage the distribution. Someone with existing networks, established security, and complete discretion. Someone who already lives outside the law. The mafia doesn't usually deal in this particular commodity. They consider it beneath their dignity. But when the CIA comes calling with an offer that could reshape their entire operation, Lucky Luciano makes an exception. After all, business is business. The problem with vast amounts of untraceable cash is that it remains untraceable only if it never touches the regular banking system. Move millions through normal channels, and questions arise. Auditors investigate. Governments notice. The agency needs a bank that operates by different rules, a financial institution that answers to no earthly authority, subject to no oversight, bound by no law except its own. The Institute for Works of Religion sits within Vatican City's walls, its true operations hidden behind layers of ecclesiastical bureaucracy. Only 5 cardinals know its complete business, and they report to one man whose word is considered infallible, perfect for washing money that officially doesn't exist. The Vatican has reasons beyond profit for joining this unholy alliance. Communism threatens more than just American interests. It threatens the very foundation of organized religion, promising to replace faith with state-sponsored atheism. Cardinal Montini, the future Pope Paul VI, understands the stakes. Better to work with questionable allies than watch the Church's influence crumble across Europe. The money flows through Vatican accounts, blessed by men who believe they're serving a higher purpose. But the Church's involvement goes deeper than simple money laundering. Vatican networks helped Nazi war criminals escape justice after the war, creating rat lines that spirited thousands of fugitives to South America. The same networks now serve CIA interests, moving weapons, intelligence, and personnel across borders with ecclesiastical protection. The alliance between American intelligence and Vatican power creates something unprecedented: a shadow government that operates across continents, answerable to no democracy, constrained by no law. In the basement archives, beneath centuries of accumulated secrets, new documents join the collection. Payment records, operational plans, names of assets who will never officially exist. The Vatican has always been good at keeping secrets. This one will be no different. Milan, December 12, 1969. The National Agrarian Bank explodes in a fireball that claims 17 lives and shatters the illusion of Italian stability. Within hours, anarchists are arrested, confessions extracted, justice seemingly served. But something doesn't fit. The explosives are military grade, far beyond what any anarchist cell could obtain. The timing coincides perfectly with crucial political negotiations. The investigation closes too quickly, too cleanly. Judge Felice Imposimato begins connecting dots that form a disturbing picture. The bombing isn't random terrorism, it's strategy. Each attack serves a purpose, shifts public opinion, eliminates obstacles to a particular political agenda. The Red Brigades claim responsibility for dozens of attacks, their communist ideology providing convenient cover for operations that serve very different masters. Car bombs in Turin, assassinations in Rome, kidnappings that remove inconvenient voices from political discourse. Prime Minister Aldo Moro becomes the most inconvenient voice of all. His historic compromise threatens to bring Italian communists into legitimate government, undermining decades of American investment in controlling Italian politics. On March 16, 1978, Moro never reaches Parliament. The Red Brigades claim him in a meticulously planned ambush, holding him for 54 days before executing him in a way that ensures maximum political impact. Journalist Mino Pecorelli investigates the connections between Moro's disappearance and powerful interests. He discovers links between Prime Minister Andreotti, Sicilian organized crime, and intelligence services that officially don't exist. Pecorelli's articles suggest a conspiracy reaching from Rome to Washington, involving the very people sworn to protect Italian democracy. His evidence remains incomplete, but his investigation threatens to expose networks that have operated in darkness for decades. On March 20th, 1979, Pecorelli is found in his car, 4 bullets ending both his life and his investigation. The pattern becomes clear to those willing to see it. Italy isn't experiencing random political violence. It's undergoing systematic destabilization, orchestrated by forces that profit from chaos and feed on fear. The strategy of tension works exactly as designed. Italian voters, terrified by communist violence, support increasingly authoritarian measures. The political center collapses, leaving only 2 choices: order or chaos. They choose order, never realizing that those providing it are the same ones who created the chaos. Vincenzo Vinciguerra sits in a police interrogation room, his confession about to shatter decades of carefully constructed lies. The Petiano bombing, he explains, wasn't the work of left-wing terrorists. It was planned, funded, and executed by Italian military intelligence. The C4 explosives came from official stores. The training was provided by NATO specialists. The operation was approved at the highest levels of government. Judge Felice Imposimato listens with growing horror as Vinciguerra describes a network of violence that reaches across Europe. False flag operations designed to blame communists for attacks carried out by their enemies. State-sponsored terrorism against innocent civilians. The investigation leads to a locked safe in Rome, containing documents that confirm Europe's darkest secret. Operation Gladio isn't just an Italian phenomenon. It's continent-wide, with cells in every NATO country, armies that answer to no elected government. From July to October 1990, Imposimato realizes he's the only person outside the conspiracy who knows the full truth about Gladio. The isolation is terrifying. Any of his colleagues could be involved. Any phone call could be monitored. Any meeting could be his last. Prime Minister Andreotti initially denies everything, but the evidence becomes overwhelming. Under political pressure, he confirms that Gladio exists, that it has operated for decades, that it has killed hundreds of innocent people. The revelation forces NATO to acknowledge what it has long denied, that member nations have maintained secret armies, trained in terrorism, equipped for operations against their own citizens. The official explanation is defensive. These armies existed only to resist Soviet occupation, they claim. The bombings, the assassinations, the systematic campaign of terror. These were unfortunate misunderstandings. But the documents tell a different story. They reveal a strategy of tension designed to prevent democratic change, to ensure that NATO countries remained aligned with American interests regardless of what their people actually wanted. The Cold War, it turns out, was never just about stopping Soviet expansion. It was about preventing European independence. Maintaining American hegemony, the Berlin Wall falls in November 1989, chunks of concrete becoming souvenirs of a defeated ideology. Television cameras capture East Germans streaming through checkpoints, families reunited after decades of separation. Western leaders declare victory in the Cold War, the triumph of freedom over oppression. Military contractors celebrate record profits. Intelligence agencies request expanded budgets to handle new global responsibilities. But something doesn't add up. The Soviet Union that collapses so suddenly, so completely, doesn't match the existential threat that justified decades of military spending and covert operations. The truth emerges slowly through declassified documents and whistleblower testimonies. The Soviet threat was real, but it was also systematically exaggerated. The economic statistics were manipulated. The military capabilities were overstated. The political stability was a facade. From 1953 to 1964, the Soviet Union couldn't feed its own people. While Americans feared nuclear annihilation, Soviet citizens stood in breadlines. While NATO planned for World War III, Soviet factories produced defective equipment with outdated technology. The brain drain began in the 1960s as Soviet scientists and engineers fled to the West. The stagnation that followed wasn't a temporary setback, but a systemic collapse that took decades to complete. By 1985, when Mikhail Gorbachev introduced glasnost and perestroika, he wasn't modernizing a strong system. He was trying to resuscitate a dying one. The openness he promised revealed the extent of Soviet weakness, the depth of citizen discontent, the complete failure of the communist experiment. The intelligence agencies that claimed to understand Soviet capabilities had missed the most important truth. Their primary enemy was already defeated, bankrupt, and preparing for surrender. Operation Gladio continued operating until 1990, maintaining secret armies to fight an enemy that no longer existed. The massive military budgets continued growing even after the Soviet Union dissolved, addressing threats that had vanished years earlier. American military spending increased by 12% in 1991, the year the Cold War officially ended. The military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned against had become self-sustaining, creating enemies to justify its existence. The greatest victory in American history became the greatest deception. The Cold War was won not through superior strength, but through the enemy's internal collapse. The threats that justified decades of covert operations, secret armies, and systematic deception were largely imaginary. The real question isn't why the Soviet Union fell. It's why the fall took so long to acknowledge, and why the machinery of secret warfare continued operating long after its stated purpose had disappeared. Gary Webb sits at his computer in 1996, typing words that will destroy his career and possibly his life. His investigation into CIA connections to Nicaraguan drug trafficking has uncovered something far more disturbing than isolated corruption. The agency that swore to protect America has been systematically poisoning American communities, funding covert operations through drug profits, and covering up its crimes through congressional investigations, led by the very people implicated in the operations. Webb's series, Dark Alliance, connects dots that powerful people hoped would remain forever scattered. The cocaine epidemic that devastated inner-city communities wasn't just a social problem. It was a strategic choice, a funding mechanism for operations that Congress wouldn't approve. The backlash is swift and devastating. Major newspapers attack Webb's credibility, his sources, his methods. The CIA conducts its own investigation, concluding that while it may have worked with individuals involved in drug trafficking, it never directly facilitated these activities. The agency investigating itself finds itself innocent. The journalists who expose the truth find themselves unemployed, discredited, and isolated. Similar patterns emerge across decades of covert operations. Whistleblowers are silenced. Investigations are controlled by the subjects being investigated. Congressional oversight becomes congressional cover-up. The Kennedy assassinations remain officially solved, but the evidence keeps pointing toward the same organizations that benefited from the brothers' deaths. The CIA and the Mafia working together on Operation Gladio, had the motive, opportunity, and means to eliminate leaders who threatened their operations. Whether they did remains officially unknown. The truth lies buried in classified files, protected by the same secrecy that enabled decades of illegal operations. What we do know is troubling enough. The agencies created to protect democracy have systematically undermined it. The institutions trusted with defending freedom have made secret alliances with organized crime. The guardians of American values have funded their operations through drug trafficking and terrorism. The Soviet Union collapsed, not because of superior American strategy, but because of its own internal contradictions. The threats that justified Operation Gladio were largely manufactured. The enemies that required secret armies were often imaginary. The real enemies of democracy weren't foreign communists, but domestic conspiracies, networks of power that operated beyond legal oversight, answerable to no elected authority, constrained by no moral law. Operation Gladio officially ended in 1990, its existence finally acknowledged, its crimes partially documented. Congressional hearings examined some operations. Journalists investigated some connections. Judges prosecuted some individuals. But the networks that enabled Gladio remain largely intact. The Vatican Bank continues operating beyond international oversight. Intelligence agencies maintain classified operations that may never be revealed. Military contractors profit from conflicts that their lobbying helped create. The pattern established during the Cold War continues in new forms. Threats are exaggerated to justify expanded budgets. Enemies are created to maintain relevance. Democratic oversight is circumvented through secrecy and misdirection. The men who built Operation Gladio believed they were saving democracy from communism. They convinced themselves that any method was justified by the stakes involved. They created a shadow government that answered to no one, constrained by nothing, capable of any action in service of its goals. Their greatest success was also their greatest failure. They defeated communism by becoming what they claimed to oppose, an unelected, unaccountable, authoritarian power that viewed democracy as an obstacle to be managed rather than a principle to be preserved. The Cold War ended, but the Cold War state persists. The enemy changed, but the methods remained. The justifications evolved, but the secrecy continued. Operation Gladio is history, but its legacy lives on in every classified budget, every covert operation, every alliance between intelligence agencies and criminal organizations that officially doesn't exist. The question isn't whether such operations continue. The question is whether we'll ever know their true extent, or whether the shadows they cast will remain forever beyond the reach of democratic oversight. In the end, the greatest victory of Operation Gladio wasn't defeating communism. It was proving that democracy could be subverted by its own defenders, that freedom could be destroyed by those sworn to protect it, and that the most dangerous enemies of constitutional government might be the ones carrying its flag. The shadows are still there, waiting for the next crisis, the next threat, the next justification for actions that can never be revealed. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep. Others are too dangerous to tell. This was both.